He used to countersign contracts with one hand, scotch in the other, never blinking. Now Stefan Bracken couldn't keep his fingers steady enough to pour that same scotch without the neck of the decanter rattling against the glass. Kira noticed the first night. She had been standing near the window of the library in his estate, a house that was too large and too cold and smelled of cedar and old money, pretending to study the rain hammering against the glass. She wasn't watching the rain, she was watching her husband. He was seated at his desk, broad-shouldered, dark-suited, the kind of man who took up space in a room even when he was perfectly still. The scar that ran from his left jaw down to his collarbone, the one the newspapers had speculated about, for 2 years before Bracken acquired all the newspapers, caught the lamplight and looked almost silver. He had survived a poisoning 18 months ago. The compound, whatever his enemies had laced into his whiskey, had done something to his central nervous system. Not enough to kill him. Not enough to stop him. Just enough to leave his hands with a tremor that arrived without warning and left the same way. He reached for the pen on the desk. His right hand moved with precision. For a moment, Kira thought she had imagined what she had seen at dinner. Then his fingers made contact with the pen, and the tremor swept through them, subtle as a current of water under still ice. The pen skittered sideways across the desk. Bracken caught it. He did it so smoothly, correcting without a sound, without looking up from the document, that if you were not watching closely, you would have missed it entirely. Kira had been watching closely since the night she arrived. She turned back to the rain. "Your breathing changed," Bracken said. His voice was low and even, carrying across the room the way cold air carries, without effort. Kira didn't pretend she hadn't heard. "I was thinking. You were watching me." "I was looking at the window." She turned. He still hadn't looked up from the document. "If you wanted privacy, you might have sent me to a different room." He signed his name. She didn't see the tremor that time. "You're my wife. This is the room I gave you." Wife. The word landed between them like something dense and slightly wrong. 2 months ago, she had been sitting in a back office in East Vancouver, 3 weeks behind on rent, working 2 sets of books for a restaurant that legally shouldn't have been profitable. Her cousin Rennie had a debt with Bracken that he couldn't pay. Rennie had a solution that he presented to Kira as a favor he was doing for her, which told her everything she needed to know about Rennie's character, and very little she didn't already know about her own options. She had not expected Bracken to be like this. She had expected a man who hid things, who spoke in ultimatums, who required visible submission the way some men require visible proof of anything they fear losing. Bracken was none of those things. He was cold in the way that old stone is cold, not aggressive, just indifferent to warmth. He had not raised his voice to her once. He had not asked anything of her at all, which in some ways was worse, a demand she could have fought. "The occupational therapist is scheduled for Thursday," Kira said. She walked to the sideboard and poured herself a glass of water, not looking at him. "The nerve conduction exercises," the specialist said. "Cancel it." "The exercises help with." I said, "Cancel it." The pen went down with quiet finality. "I have the Huang meeting Thursday. I'm not spending an hour squeezing rubber balls before I sit across from the man who controls half the port traffic in the lower mainland." Kira turned. Bracken was finally looking at her. His eyes were grey and very direct, the kind of eyes that had learned to do the work his hands could no longer do. "If you skip the therapy," she said, keeping her voice even, "the tremor is worse by end of week. The Huang meeting is Thursday afternoon. Do the therapy in the morning." She paused. "Unless you'd rather Huang watches you spill his tea." The silence that followed was significant. Bracken stared at her. "Thursday morning," he said finally. "Tell them the side entrance." She nodded and walked out. She didn't let herself exhale until she was 3 steps into the hallway. The boardroom occupied the east wing, which Bracken had converted after he stopped going to his downtown offices. Kira understood why, now that she had seen the life inside this estate. It was a fortress that had decided to be elegant rather than obvious about it. The walls were cedar-paneled, the rugs were Persian, the security was invisible and everywhere. Sark was already seated when she entered with the coffee service. She had learned, in 2 months, to be invisible in this room. She poured, she set cups in front of men who did not look at her. She stood near the sideboard and watched. Sark was Bracken's second-in-command. He was a tall man with a salt and pepper beard, and the kind of careful, measured pleasantness that Kira associated with people who had a great deal to hide. He had been with the organization for 11 years. He had a wife, 2 daughters in private school in West Vancouver, and a handshake that lingered slightly too long. She hadn't liked him from the first meeting. Numbers people developed instincts about other numbers people. The Tsavasan shipment was short, Sark was saying. He leaned back in his chair with the ease of a man who felt at home here. 40 crates logged, 38 cleared, the dock supervisors asking questions. The dock supervisor asks questions every second month, Bracken said. His voice was flat and controlled. Because every second month, somebody goes down there and gives him a reason to. You went down there last month, Sark. A brief silence. I smooth things over. At a cost. What did you promise him? A number. What number? Sark named it. Kira watched Bracken's hands on the table. They were completely still. He was gripping the armrests of his chair, she realized, anchoring himself. That's a significant increase from the standing agreement, Bracken said. Sark shrugged. Cost of living. Everything's up. My cost structure isn't up. Bracken's voice stayed level, but there was something beneath it now, something pressurized. My cost structure is exactly what I set it at, because I reviewed it in January. Sark's eyes did a thing, a small involuntary drift toward Bracken's hands, then back up. It was quick, barely a second. Kira saw it. She recognized that drift. She had seen it at the dinner table, at the entrance hall, in the library. It was the look that assessed, that calculated, that watched for the tremor the way you watch a crack in a bridge support, waiting to learn how much weight it will hold. Sark thought Bracken was fading. He was building a case for it, one careful glance at a time. And then, as if the thought itself had summoned it, Bracken's right hand moved to reach for his coffee cup, and the tremor arrived. Not violent, not obvious to the room, but the cup shifted in his grip, a small, involuntary rattle of porcelain against saucer. Kira moved. She stepped forward from the sideboard and placed a leather-bound portfolio flat on the table directly in front of Bracken, sliding it under the edge of his hands. The revised port projection, she said, keeping her voice factual. You asked me to pull it before the Huang meeting. Bracken closed his hands on the portfolio. The tremor had something to grip now, to brace against. His knuckles whitened, and then, slowly, he controlled it. He did not look at her. Leave it, he said. His voice was all authority, nothing else. We'll cover the Tsavasan shortfall from the contingency account. Sark, I want a revised number for Huang by Wednesday noon. The port supervisor gets the standing rate, not $1 more. If he has questions after that, refer them to me directly. Sark nodded. His pleasant expression had not changed. But his eyes had gone flat. Kira walked back to the sideboard. After the meeting ended, after Sark and the others had filed out, she was collecting the cups when she felt Bracken's gaze on her back. You weren't asked to bring anything, he said. You didn't need to ask. She set the cups on the tray. The portfolio was on the credenza. It was plausible. Did Sark believe it? She turned. Bracken was still seated, his hands resting flat on the leather cover of the portfolio. No, she said honestly, but believing it and proving it are different problems. You bought yourself time. Bracken studied her. His expression gave away very little. Go. She went. She hadn't been sleeping well. The estate's master suite was vast and cold in the way of rooms that have not been lived in warmly for a long time. She had been given her own room adjacent. Bracken had made that arrangement without discussion, and she lay awake most nights, listening to the rain against the windows and the sound of him moving in the room on the other side of the wall. He didn't sleep much either. It was past midnight when she heard his voice. She had gotten up for water and was crossing the dark hallway when she heard him through the study door, which was not fully closed. "Tell me it's not getting worse. I'd rather not insult each other." A pause. A doctor on the phone, she realized. "The timeline I was given was 18 months to stabilization. It has been 18 months. Another pause, longer. Then quietly, "I see." She should have moved on. She stood in the dark hallway and did not. When she heard the chair scrape back, she walked quickly toward the kitchen, but not quickly enough. The study door opened and Bracken was in the hallway. He stopped when he saw her. She said, "I couldn't sleep." "I know." He leaned against the doorframe. He was not in his suit, just a dark shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and the particular exhaustion of a man who has been holding himself together all day and has only just stopped. "I could hear you not sleeping." In the low light, the scar along his jaw seemed less severe, or perhaps she had simply stopped registering it the way you stop hearing familiar sounds. She said, "The nerve conduction tests, what did the doctor say?" It wasn't a question, he heard that. He said what doctors say when they don't want to say the thing they mean. Bracken pushed off from the doorframe and walked past her toward the kitchen. After a moment, she followed. He put the kettle on. He did it carefully, the way she had noticed he did everything now, with the kind of deliberate precision that compensated for the moments he couldn't predict. He stood with his back to her while the kettle heated. "I built this organization with these hands," he said, not dramatically, just as a fact. "I pulled it out of 3 separate attempts to dissolve it, 2 of which involved people I considered close. I have never in my life needed someone to do something for me that I could do myself." "I know. You handed me that portfolio today." "I did." "Don't." He turned. His eyes in the low kitchen light were difficult to read, which she suspected was intentional. "Don't manage me. Don't plan little interventions. I don't want to be handled by my own wife." Kira sat down at the kitchen island. "I wasn't managing you. I was protecting the organization. If Sark sees an opening, he takes it. You know that. Sark is not the problem right now." "Sark is absolutely the problem right now." She kept her voice level. "He looked at your hands during that meeting. He's been looking at your hands for 2 months. He is calculating, Bracken, in the same way you would calculate if the positions were reversed." Something flickered in his expression. He poured the tea badly, not very badly. Anyone else in the room would have seen a man making tea, but she saw the cup shift, the small correction, the tightening of his jaw. He set the cup in front of her and stayed on the other side of the island. "You should leave," he said. She looked up. "Your cousin's debt is cleared. I had it cleared in September." His voice had gone flat and administrative. "There is no obligation. If you want to go, I'll have the papers drafted and a settlement arranged. You'd have enough to start over properly. Somewhere that isn't this." Kira looked at him for a long moment. "Rennie's debt is already cleared, since September." "Yes." "You didn't tell me." "No." She'd let that sit. "So I've been here for 2 months for no contractual reason." "Technically. And you're telling me now because—" "Because," Bracken said, and then he stopped. He looked at the counter, at his hands resting on the granite. The tremor was light at the moment, barely visible, but she could see the slight involuntary motion in his fingers. He looked at it the way a person looks at evidence of something they have been trying not to acknowledge. "Shh. I built things with these hands," he said again, quieter. "I can't." He cut himself off, started again. "I don't know how to ask anyone for anything. I never learned how, and now there are things that require that need." He stopped. The kitchen was very quiet. "I cannot button my own jacket," he said finally. His voice had gone rough with the specific roughness of a man who has not said a true thing to another person in a very long time. "On a bad morning, I cannot do up the top 2 buttons. I stand in front of a mirror in my own house, and I think about the men who work for me and what they would do if they knew. I think about Sark." He looked at her, And then I think about you standing in that hallway, pretending not to watch. I wasn't pretending, Kira said. I was watching. I know. She stood up from the island. She walked around it and stopped in front of him. He was taller than her by nearly a head, and the expression on his face was something she hadn't seen on him before. Wary in the way of a man who has realized he has said too much and cannot take it back. She reached out and took both his hands in hers. He went completely still. His hands were warm. The tremor was light right now, just a faint, restless current under the skin. She held them steady, and the tremor didn't stop. It didn't work like that, but it slowed, the way a spinning thing slows when it finds something to push against. You don't need steady hands to run this organization, she said. Her voice was quiet, but she didn't make it gentle. Gentle wasn't what he needed. You need to know where Sark is moving your money. You need to know which port official is talking to which competitor. You need to know things, and you're very good at knowing things. He looked at her, very directly, the way he looked at everything. I'm good at knowing things too, Kira continued. I've been doing your books for 6 weeks without you asking me to, and I've found 4 discrepancies that your accountants missed. I haven't said anything because you didn't ask. A pause. What discrepancies? Show me where you keep the port ledgers, and I'll show you. She let go of his hands. He didn't move for a moment. Then he said, Come. She had been right about the numbers. Bracken sat at his desk while she laid out what she had found, page by page, column by column. She didn't dramatize it. Numbers didn't need dramatizing. They were already dramatic if you knew how to read them. Sark had been moving money laterally through a subcontract account attached to the Tsarvasan operation. 12,000 a month running for 7 months. Not enough to bleed the organization noticeably. Enough to build a reserve. He's not skimming, Kira said. He's saving. There's a difference. He's building capital, Bracken said. For something. They looked at each other across the desk. I want to know who he's talking to, Bracken said. He said it quietly, with the stillness of a man who has made a decision and is comfortable with its consequences. Don't go looking. Let him think you haven't noticed. Let the conversation happen on your ground. You have a port contact named Hadwick, Kira said. He's listed in the ledger as an independent contact. He was also at the Tsarvasan dock last month when Sark went down. I think Hadwick is the conduit. Invite Hadwick to the estate. Make Sark present the invitation. So he knows you know, but he doesn't know how much you know. Bracken was quiet for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth shifted, the closest she had seen him come to a smile. You're precise. I work with numbers, Kira said. Everything else is just numbers with faces on it. Hadwick came 4 days later and folded like a paper receipt in a rainstorm. Sitting in the study with Bracken across from him, with the low sound of rain outside and one of the estate's large dogs settled near the door, Hadwick gave them everything. The conversations with Sark, the timeline, the arrangement with a competitor organization out of Calgary that had been sending representatives to Vancouver for the last 3 months, quiet as tide. When he left, Kira stood at the sideboard and felt the particular satisfaction of a column that had finally balanced. He'll go straight to Sark, she said. Yes. You wanted that. Bracken looked at her. I want Sark to know I see him. Let him make a move. Panicked men make mistakes. She handed him his glass of scotch. He took it, their fingers overlapping briefly, and he didn't move his hand away immediately. He didn't say thank you. He wasn't a man who said thank you. But he didn't move his hand away. The warning came at 2 a.m. The rain had stopped. That was what woke Kira, the sudden silence of it, and then the sound beneath the silence, which was the estate's dog not barking any more, which it had been doing intermittently for an hour, and then wasn't. She sat up in the dark. 3 seconds of absolute stillness, and then her bedroom door opened. She didn't scream, perhaps because some instinct recognized the weight of the footstep, the particular quality of the way Bracken moved through space. He was already dressed, which meant he hadn't been sleeping either. "Stay close," he said. His voice was barely above a breath. "Don't turn on any lights." Kira got up. From somewhere in the West Wing came a sound that was not quite a sound, more of a pressure, a concussion of air that resolved into the distant echo of breaking glass. Bracken crossed to the wall beside the fireplace and pressed something. A section of panel swung inward. Inside was a small, recessed shelf, and on it 2 handguns and a radio. His right hand reached for one of the handguns. The tremor hit at the worst possible moment. She saw it in his jaw first, the locked stillness of a man trying to will his own nervous system into compliance. His fingers closed on the grip, and the tremor ran through them, and the gun shifted, and he corrected, and the expression on his face in the dark was the same expression she had seen in the kitchen, at the dining table. Not fear, but the particular fury of a man at war with himself. Kira stepped forward. She put her hands over his, both of them, her smaller fingers pressing down over his, holding steady. He inhaled sharply. "Together," she said. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then his hands steadied. He didn't let her keep her hands over his. He took the gun properly, his grip solid now, the tremor suppressed by some mechanism she didn't fully understand, adrenaline, or the specific anger of a man defending his own ground, or possibly just the fact that he was not alone in that room, and something in his body responded to that differently than it responded to solitude. He handed her the second gun and showed her in 3 seconds how to operate the safety. What happened next was not clean or cinematic. It was 15 minutes of voices in the hallway, 2 bursts of gunfire from below that she felt in her teeth. Bracken moving her from room to room with the focused economy of a man who had done this before and was adapting without complaint. Galt cleared the 2nd floor. 2 men from the Calgary organization who had come in through the service entrance were intercepted before they reached the main hall. Sark, it turned out, had come himself. He was not a man who had expected this to go wrong. Dawn was grey and very still over the mountains. Sark was in the library, not seated at the table. Galt had brought him in on foot, which was the relevant detail, and he stood in the center of the room looking considerably less polished than usual. His coat was torn. His careful pleasantness was gone entirely. Bracken sat behind the desk. Kira stood to his left, 1 step back. The cut on her hand from a broken window frame she had caught during the scramble through the dark hallway had been wrapped in white gauze. It was a small injury, and she didn't think about it. 2 other members of the organization stood near the far wall, watching. Sark looked at Bracken. Then, with the desperation of a man choosing his last gambit, he looked at Kira. "You married a liability," he said. "You know that, don't you? How long before the hands are too bad for him to hold any of this together? How long before?" "I have the subcontract ledgers," Kira said. Her voice was flat and clear in the early morning air. 7 months. $84,000 routed through Hadwick, who gave us your Calgary contact's name, his phone number, and the dates of your last 4 meetings. She paused. "You're not a liability, Sark. You're just slow." Sark looked at her. The gambit dissolved. Bracken set the ledger on the desk. He did not raise his voice. He rarely did. It was one of the things about him that she had initially mistaken for coldness and had since revised. "You watched my hands for 6 months, Bracken said. You counted on them failing. What you didn't count on was the person standing next to me." He looked at Sark with the grey, level gaze she had seen stop conversations cold. "Take him to the Burnaby office. Make sure he understands the full accounting of what he owes before this is finished." He said the rest in 2 sentences, quiet and precise. When Sark was removed and the library doors closed, the silence that remained was different from all the other silences she had navigated in this house. It had weight, but not the pressurized weight of something about to break. It had the weight of a settled thing. Bracken looked at the bandage on her hand. "Let me see it," he said. She walked to the desk and held out her hand. He took it with both of his, carefully, with the deliberate precision she recognized, and examined the gauze. His hands were steadier in this moment than she had seen them in weeks. "It's fine," she said. "I know." He didn't let go immediately. She looked at his face, the scar along his jaw, the grey eyes that looked at everything like it was a set of numbers to be reconciled. "You handled that precisely," he said. "We handled it," she corrected. He looked at her for a long moment. His thumb moved slightly against the back of her hand. Not a calculated gesture. She would have recognized that. Just a thing that happened. "Stay," he said. Not a command, not quite a question. Just a word, placed between them, where she could do whatever she wanted with it. Kira thought about the back office in East Vancouver, the 2 sets of books, the 3 weeks behind rent. The cousin who had handed her life to a stranger to resolve his own failures and framed it as an act of generosity. She thought about the portfolio she had slid across a boardroom table without being asked. The hands she had held in the dark. "I need access to the full accounts," she said. "Not just port operations, everything." He studied her. "And I want it in writing that I report directly to you, not through Galt or whoever you promote next." "Done," he said. "Then yes," Kira said, "I'll stay." Winter came in from the Pacific with cold rain and the particular grey light that settled over Vancouver like a held breath. The mountains disappeared for weeks at a time behind cloud. Inside the estate, the fire in the main room burned most evenings. Bracken was at the desk going through Thursday's correspondence when Kira came in and set a cup of tea beside him. He reached for it without looking up and picked it up without difficulty. The tremor was quiet tonight. She sat down across from him with her own cup and the March accounts, which she had been reviewing all afternoon. "The Tsawasan throughput is up 11%, she said. "I saw. The Newport supervisor is cooperative." "Surprisingly so." "It's less surprising when you look at the arrangement I negotiated." She turned a page. "I got him down from Sark's inflated number and up from your original figure. He thinks he won. He didn't, but he thinks he did, which is the relevant variable." Bracken looked up from his correspondence. He looked at her with the grey, assessing gaze she had learned, over 5 months, to read as a kind of attention that most people never received from him. "You're going to put my accountants out of business," he said. "Probably." She didn't look up from the ledger. They missed 4 discrepancies in Q3. "So you've said." "I'll keep saying it until you let me audit the full Q4. He was quiet for a moment. "Fine," he said. She looked up. He had gone back to his correspondence, but the corner of his mouth had shifted, that barely there movement she had learned to watch for. She went back to the ledger. The fire settled in the grate. Outside, the rain started again, steady and distant. At some point, without either of them particularly deciding to, they had stopped sitting across from each other and started sitting beside each other. She wasn't sure exactly when it had happened. The estate was large, but they had found, by some process of elimination, that the library in the evenings with the fire and the rain outside was where each of them ended up. It had stopped being remarkable. At 11, he closed the last of his correspondence and turned to her. His hands rested on the desk, still and easy in the low light. "I spoke to the neurologist again," he said. She set down her pen and... "The trajectory is what it is. Some days are worse. Some are better." He looked at his hands. "I've stopped expecting a different answer." Kira looked at him. "Are you at peace with that?" "No," he said simply. "But I'm functional. There's a difference." She nodded. He reached across and closed the ledger, his hand coming to rest near hers on the desk. He didn't move it away. "When I told you to leave," he said in September, "I meant it, at the time." "I know. I was certain you would." "I know that, too." He looked at her. In his eyes, the grey, precise, exhausted eyes of a man who had built something enormous and nearly lost it to his own body and the ambitions of the people closest to him. She saw something she had first noticed in the kitchen, in the dark, with a kettle on and rain against the windows. Something that was not yet fully trust, but had the same shape. "I would still be managing the port through Sark's inflated numbers," he said. Yes. And the Calgary connection would have consolidated by February. Probably March. Sark was slower than he thought he was. Bracken was quiet for a moment. Then I thought the thing that would break this was my hands. Kira said, I know. It wasn't. No, she said, it wasn't. Outside, the rain continued its long, steady conversation with the cedar and the dark. The fire burned down to low orange coals. Neither of them moved to refill it. His hand, still resting near hers on the desk, turned over. She put her hand in his, and whatever tremor was left, she held.